It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Serbia. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 25 on the players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Serbia's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examine the participation of players in games over the recent period and a couple of other factors to categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, seemingly off the squad, and retired or off the squad for a long period. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. At that time, we'll go back over the list that we create here and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode will have three sections. In section one, we look at some general information on the team. Section two, we cover the main candidates in each position and their likelihood of reaching the squad. And in section three, we summarize and have some concluding business. Let's begin then with section one, looking at some general information on the squad. And we begin by noting any significant retirements. And we do have a couple of players who were on the 2022 World Cup squad, but they were mostly substitutes. So we don't think they're kind of big names here. So we'll cover them when we go through the players, but not mention them here. There's really no big retirements for Serbia. Next, we look at their club affiliation just to try to give an overview of the kind of clubs they play for. So big players with big clubs. We have Nemanja Gudelj with Sevilla, and most of them play for reasonably big clubs, maybe not the very top clubs, but definitely first division clubs in various countries. Dusan Tadic, their captain, plays for Fenerbahce. They have two players with Juventus, including Filip Kostic, and Aleksandar Mitrovic plays for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia, so a bit of an outlier there. Maybe more to the point is they have a lot of young players, kind of not big names yet, with less than 10 caps, but playing for good quality clubs. So we have four players like that who play in for top teams in Russia, and then Italy is probably the next most represented country with teams like Roma. So good quality on the squad. We won't go into too much detail though, but fairly respectable club affiliations for Serbia. Let's move on to recent games. So we're examining participation of players from after the previous World Cup in December 2022. Serbia played 13 games over that period from basically January 2023 to March 2024. And we'll take a look at Serbia's participation in tournaments. So strangely, they tend to make World Cups and not make Euro Cups. So this 2024 Euro Cup is their first one since I think it was 2000. Meanwhile, they've made 4 out of the last 5 World Cups. We're going to try to not go too much into the weeds on player history and player tournament history. We'll make mention of whether they were participants in those 2 World Cups in 2018 and 2022. But if you want a bit more detail on that, we did that a little bit more when we presented them for the World Cup. So that information is still relevant if you want a bit of a deeper dive. Okay, let's look at their formations over the past while. So pretty consistently, it's a 4-3-2-1 formation, and that's a good thing to keep in mind. They used it almost 2/3 of the time, 63% of the time. And then small variations on that a 3-4-1-2 rather than 2-1. They use that twice, and a 3-2-2-2-1. That's quite similar to a 3-4-2-1 formation. They use that twice. Otherwise, just two other formations that they used there. But again, keep the 3-4-2-1 in mind. It's almost always a three-man back line, and almost always a single forward. We'll just go over the games a little bit, because there are some friendlies that, mixed in there with qualifying games for this campaign. So I do want to point out a few. The first one is in January of 2023. This was an off-season friendly with the USA B team, and for Serbia, it was really more of a recruitment match with several players used who never returned to the squad, kind of a one-time game with the national team. A couple of veterans did play in that game, but mostly it seemed to be trying out new players. That was the first game. The fourth game in June of 2023 was a friendly with Jordan. Again, a couple of veterans used in that, but this one was more used to give backup players a chance on the field. Not so much a recruitment match where they seem to be trying out brand new players, although there are a couple of those. 3 of the last 4 games actually were friendlies for Serbia, and again, there's a little bit of rotation of backup players in those games, especially in the second last game, where they also experimented with a different formation there. 4 at the back, that was a 4-3-3 formation. So a few experimental games in there, and we generally won't talk about players who just appeared once when we go through the positions. Okay, our last order of business is their upcoming friendlies prior to the Cup, their warm-up games. The first one is on June 4th. That is Austria versus Serbia in Austria. And the second one is June 8th, Sweden versus Serbia in Sweden. So 2 away games there. And that will shed a little light on some of the questions that I have still lingering after going through the squad, and that you may have once we do. Okay, let's move on to section 2 and begin looking at the players. Well, we actually begin with the manager, and I'll just give a little narrative here on how things have gone over the last few years. So Mladen Kustajic is we'll call him the outgoing manager in a sense. He was their manager through the World Cup in 2018. We'll talk about a couple of managers in between, but the current one is Dragan Stojkovic. So we'll give a little bio on him. He played for Yugoslavia FR and for Yugoslavia. So from 1983 to 91 for Yugoslavia, and 1992 to 2001. So a career, an international career spanning 20 years. And he played about 40 caps for each and got 15 goals overall. And he was a participant in the Euro 1984, the World Cup 1990, and in World Cup 1998 too. So quite a good career as a player. Now he's the manager. He's manager since 2021 and managed a team in China and in Japan. Actually, both of those 5-year stints. Those are his only other 2 managing jobs. So let's begin with the narrative, or have a narrative. So Serbia reached the 2018 World Cup under Mladen Kustajic, but he was sacked after a poor start to Euro 2024 qualifying. In fact, it was really just a 5-0 loss to Ukraine in the second game that was their only bad result. They had tied Portugal away in the first. Anyway, Kristajic was out, and a new manager came in. It was Tumbakovic. Lubisa Tumbakovic took over, and they reached the finals, the final playoffs for Euro 2020 under him, but lost to Scotland in the last game, the second of 2 playoff games. He was sacked after that, and a caretaker manager took over until our current manager, Dragan Stojkovic, was appointed, and in 2021. And he led them to the World Cup 2022 through their qualification campaign, although, reached another World Cup, did Serbia, and he also led them through qualification for this cup, which in truth was not a very convincing qualification, but good enough to qualify automatically. Dragan Stojkovic then, their manager through this tournament, and we begin with the players and the goalkeepers. So we're going to list the players, and we begin with Vanja Milinkovic-Savic as a definite candidate, Predrag Rajkovic as a likely candidate, and Georgi Petrovic, also a likely candidate. And we have a few players who seem to be off the squad. One of them is Marko Dimitrovic. He was their backup keeper in both the 2018 and 2022 World Cup, so on the roster there, but has not appeared for the team since the 2022 World Cup. Next, Marko Ilic. He last appeared on the team in September 2022. We won't go into too much detail. And the other one, Miles Villar, last appeared on the bench in October 2021. So he shouldn't actually even be on the list here because he's gone for a long time. Let's look at the players then, a bit of a biography or an introduction. Vanja Milinkovic-Savic is 27 years old, and he has 18 caps for the national team since 2021. And he plays for Torino in Italy. He was the starting keeper in World Cup 2022 and has since started 8 of their 13 games, on the bench for 3, including the last 2 matches, and not selected for 2 others. I should point out, though, that it's mostly friendlies that he has not missed, and we'll talk about that in the summary. Next, we have Predrag Rajkovic, and he's 28 years old. He actually has more caps than Milinkovic-Savic. 31 caps since 2013. He's been on the team then for a long time. Rajkovic plays for Mallorca in Spain since 2022 and was a backup keeper in both of those World Cups. Since the start of 2023, he started 3 of their 13 games and was on the bench for 8. Just 2 matches that he wasn't selected for. So Rajkovic we see as a likely candidate. Finally, Georgi Petrovic, he's 24 years old, been with the team since 2021, but just 3 caps in that time. And he plays for Chelsea in England. So one of those young players kind of not experienced with the national team yet, but with good quality clubs. He's been with Chelsea since 2023 and was with New England in the New England Revolution in the USA before that. Petrovic started 2 of their 13 games since the start of 2023, and he was on the bench for 6, but there were 5 matches he was not selected for. But we consider him a likely candidate because the lack of competition for probably a third backup keeper there. So let's summarize the position. Milinkovic-Savic started all 3 games in the World Cup, and by the way, those games are not part of the count of their recent participation. A starter in the World Cup. Their first game in 2023 was a friendly in January. That off the calendar game with the USA, which a lot of players didn't play in, and actually Milinkovic-Savic was not called up for that game, nor a similar friendly with Jordan in June. So Petrovic and Rajkovic got their chance to start games. Each one of them started one of those two games. Milinkovic-Savic was otherwise the starter until he was benched for 3 of the last 4 games, all of those friendlies, and Rajkovic started 2 of them and Petrovic 1. So a couple of signals that Rajkovic is the second string keeper and Petrovic the third. Meanwhile, Milinkovic-Savic still seems the starter because he started all of their qualifying games, or all of their important games over this period. Okay, let's move on to central defenders. And we begin with Strahinja Pavlovic as a definite candidate. And Nikola Milenkovic, also a definite candidate. We have Strahinja Erakovic as a likely candidate. And Milos Velkovic as the first of 3 possible candidates. The other 2 are Serdar Babic and Urhan Masovic. And then we have one player who seems to be off the squad. That is Matija Nastasic. And despite having 34 caps over a 10-year period, he was not selected for any of the, or either of the World Cups there. And he last appeared for the team in March of 2022. However, I wanted to put his name on the list because he was called up to the preliminary squad for a friendly in March 2024. So not completely off the squad, I would say. The other one is Stefan Mitrovic. There are 2 of those on the team. One is a left winger with just 2 caps, but this Stefan Mitrovic has 36 caps and was a substitute in the 2022 World Cup, but he hasn't appeared for the national team since there. Let's go back and look at the players that are candidates in the 2-man central, the 3-man central defense, which I'll talk about in the summary. Strahinja Pavlovic is just 23 years old. He has 33 caps and 3 goals since 2020 and plays for Red Bull Salzburg in Austria. And he was a starting keeper. He was a starter in the World Cup in 2022. And has since started 8 of their 13 games over the recent period, on the bench for 4, and not selected for that January 2023 friendly, as many veterans weren't. So Pavlovic, a definite candidate here. Next, we have Nikola Milenkovic. And, sorry, I was just getting the graphics right for YouTube watchers there. Milenkovic is 26 years old and he has 52 caps and 3 goals since 2016. He was a starter in both of the World Cups, 2018 and 2021, and started 7 of their 13 games since, subbing in for 3 and not selected for 3 matches. Nevertheless, we consider him a definite candidate here. Next, we have our likely candidate, Strahinja Erakovic, and he's 23 years old with 8 caps and 1 goal since 2022. Another of the younger players coming up, he plays for Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia since 2023, and he was selected for the World Cup in 2022, but was on the bench for that tournament. Erakovic has started 4 of their 13 games since the start of 2023, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 6 though, so just 1 match that he wasn't selected for. That was that first match, the friendly with the USA. So Erakovic, a likely candidate here. And our possible candidate, or the first of them, is, I think I put it wrong on the graphic, so I'll just fix that. It is Milos Velkovic, and he is 30 years old. 29 years old, and has been with Serbia since 2017. He has 29 caps and 1 goal in that time, and plays for Werder Bremen in Germany since 2016. So he's been with them a long time. He was born in Switzerland and was selected for both the 2018 and 2022 World Cup, just a substitute in 2018, but a starter in 2022. Since then, he started 5 of their 12 games. He was injured for 2 of them and not selected for 6 others, including the last 2 matches. So that's why we have Milos Veljković as a possible candidate here. Next, we have Srdan Babic. He is 28 years old and has been with Serbia since 2022 with 8 caps and 1 goal. So another young player coming through with, he's with Spartak Moscow in Russia since 2023, and he was selected for the World Cup in 2022, just a substitute there. Babic has started 4 of their 13 games over the recent period, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. The 3 matches he was not selected for were the first 3. So Babic on the quite inserted into the squad. He was out with a hamstring strain since early May, but he was back on the bench for the last game of the season. So when I was checking, he was out with a due date back of June 13th, but actually now that what would you say, tag on his name has been removed. So I'm guessing that means he is back in action. But we will update that on the in part 2. Our final possible candidate is Urhan Masovic, and he's 25 years old and has been with Serbia since 2022, 5 caps and no goals, and he plays for Bochum in Belgium. In Germany. Bochum in Germany since 2020. Masovic started 2 of their games over this recent period. He was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. He was not selected for 8 matches, but he did play the last 2 matches. So we have to put Masovic as a possible candidate because of that. Okay, those are the candidates, and we're dealing with 3 positions here. It's always a 3-man central defense for Serbia. In the cup, it was Veljković, Pavlović, and Milenkovic here. They played all 3 games of the cup together. And after that, though, there was a lot of mixing of players and even switching of positions within those 3 positions. So perhaps the best way to explain it is by the number of starts each player got. So the World Cup starters did remain the most prevalent players. Pavlović has 8 starts out of the 13 games, Milenkovic 7, and Veljković just 5 starts. But I should say those were his only call-ups during this period. So Veljković a bit less likely than the rest, it seems. We also had defensive midfielder Gudelj coming in, and he got 5 caps. That was primarily in the first half of the period we're talking about, and in the second half, around the fall of 2023, he went back to being a defensive midfielder. Some of the other candidates we've met here, Irakovic, Babic, and Masovic, all started the June 2023 friendly with Jordan, and they tended to play the friendly games. Irakovic and Babic, though, sometimes did replace or sometimes did step in to start qualification games, but Masovic did not. Okay, so pretty complex there in central defense. And the other positions will be a bit more straightforward. Let's move on to left backs. And we're making a change here because they always use the 3-man defense. The left backs, if they're used at all, become left wingers. So we're going to actually just change this position to left wingers and right wingers too. We have been dealing with wingers kind of in the left attacking and right attacking positions in most of the media casts here, but we're going to treat them separately here because of the 4-2-3-1. Sorry, 4-3-2-1. It means they have kind of a winger and a sorry, what am I talking about there? I'm confused in my mind envisioning it. Because of the 3-4-2-1 formation, they have both a winger and an attacking midfielder. So we'll kind of treat the wingers like defenders who are moving up here. And that works well for the narrative. Let's begin then with the candidates. We have Filip Kostic as a definite candidate, and he is coded as a left winger. And then we have Filip Mladenovic, who is definite also, and he's coded as a left back. We also have a player possible but unlikely, Aleksa Terzic. He's also coded as a left back. Okay, let's look at these candidates. Filip Kostic, as I said, a left winger, but we've moved him here for the sake of this discussion. Kostic is 31 years old and has 62 caps and 3 goals since 2015. He plays for Juventus in Italy since 2022, and he was a sub in the World Cup 2018 and started on the bench in 2022 as well. But in both cases, he gained a starting position after game 1. Kostic has started 6 of their 13 games since the start of 2023, but he also subbed in for and was on the bench for 1. So he just missed 2 matches, one through injury and the other through non-selection. That is Kostic, Filip Kostic, and we also have Filip Mladenovic, and he is 32 years old. He only has 30 caps and 1 goal since 2012, so not used that much. He plays for Panathinaikos in Greece since 2023, and he was not a consideration, it seems, for the 2018 World Cup, but he was for the 2022 World Cup, where he started game 1 and then lost his position to Kostic. Or maybe not losing the position so much as the two alternating, because that's what they've done since then. Mladenovic started 5 of their 13 games. He subbed in for 4 and was on the bench for 3, so just 1 that he was not selected for. Finally, we have Aleksa Terzic. He is a player for Red Bull Salzburg. He has 5 caps, so one of those young players coming through, and I'll make it short. He was on the bench for 1 game, and he started 1 game and on the bench for 1 game after returning from an absence. But then he was out with 2 separate injuries for the last 4 matches. So Terzic looks like he's not a strong candidate here. And let's summarize the position. So again, the 3-4-1-2 does not call for a left back, but we're covering left wing here. And on the left then, Mladenovic was the starter in the 2022 World Cup, but Kostic took over and played games 2 and 3. And these two exchanged the position going forward. Kostic played more in the first third of this period, Mladenovic in the second third, and then they exchanged quite evenly in the more recent games. And Terzic did start 1 game, as we saw, but was out injured at the end. Okay, over to the right side, so same thing here. And I'll just go straight to the candidates. We have Andrea Zivkovic as a definite candidate. He is coded actually as an attacking midfielder. And then we have Nemanja Radonjic as a possible candidate. He is at least coded as a winger, but primarily as a left winger. But he's appeared more on the right during this period. And then we do have a right back Milan Gazic, who is a possible candidate but an injury risk. So we'll talk about that when we get to him. Let's go back to the top and look at Andrea Zivkovic. So he's 27 years old and he has 45 caps and 1 goal since 2013. And he plays for PAOK in Greece since 2020. He was with Benfica in Portugal before that. He was selected for both the World Cups, a sub in 2018 and a starter in the 2022 World Cup. And Zivkovic has started 8 of their 13 games since the start of 2023, as well as subbing in for 4. Just 1 match he was not selected for. So Zivkovic, a definite candidate. And Nemanja Radonjic is 28 years old and has 44 caps and 5 goals since 2017. He plays for Torino in Italy, but actually was on loan to Mallorca in Spain since the beginning of 2024. Radonjic was selected for both the Cups. He was a substitute in both World Cups, and he has since started 2 of their 12 games, subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 3, and not selected for the last 2 matches, which is why we have him at the possible level here, so not selected recently. And our third candidate, Milan Gazic, is also 28 years old, and he has been with Serbia since 2021 with just 2 caps. He plays for CSKA Moscow in Russia since 2022. So kind of fits into the categories of these inexperienced players with strong clubs, except that he is a bit older than most of them. Gazic returned after a 3-year absence in March of 2024. Didn't start either game, but he was subbed in for 1. And no, I think that's wrong. I think he started 1 game there and then was not selected and actually probably suspended for the 1 other. We have a little anecdote for you here when we get to the summary. Okay, so let's look at the position. On the right side, just as on the left, we're kind of converting the right back position to right winger position. And Zivkovic played all 3 games in the Cup and most of the games since then. He was replaced, though, 5 times, but Radonjic was the only player to do so more than once. So we won't mention the other players who just played single games, except for the interesting story of Gazic. A bit comically, he received his first call up in 3 years to play against Russia in a friendly, and Russia is where he plays his club soccer, as we saw. So his big chance, but he got a red card just 21 minutes into the match. Was probably suspended for the last game, and perhaps there goes his opportunity with the national team. So it sounds a bit cruel to say that's comical, but there is a certain sense of comedy to it. We did say, though, that Gazic was also injured. He's out with a hamstring injury since mid-May, but he is expected back on June 18th. So a couple of things piling up against his chances here. But sorry, did I say June 18th? It's June 17th. He might recover from his injury just as the Cup begins. Okay, that covers the defense. Let's move on to the midfield, and we'll begin by introducing defensive midfielders, and we have a lot, and none of them definite candidates, which suggests a lot of switching and changing in the midfield. Let's look at the candidates, though. For defensive midfielders, we just have 1 player coded this way. That's Nemanja Maksimovic, and we have him as a possible candidate. And I might as well just throw in the central midfielders as well. We have several likely candidates coded this position, and the first is Gudelj. Nemanja Gudelj, and then we have Ivan Ilic and Sasha Lukic. All three of those likely candidates, and then a possible candidate in Marko Grujic. So let's go back and look at those. Actually, not as many as I thought here. Let's look at the defensive midfielder, Nemanja Maksimovic. He's 29 years old and has 48 caps and no goals, and he's been with Serbia since 2016. He plays for Getafe in Spain since 2018, was with Valencia before that. On the preliminary squad for the 2018 World Cup was Maksimovic, but didn't make the final cut. But he did in 2022 and appeared in all three games, actually, just to start in game 2. Maksimovic has since started 3 of their 13 games since the start of 2023, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, but not selected for 6 matches. So the first 4, so that's not a problem, but the last 2 matches was not selected for. So always a concern for a player's chances when they're not selected in the matches leading up to the Cup. So we have Nemanja Maksimovic as a possible candidate. Let's move on to the central midfield candidates. So Nemanja Gudelj is 32 years old, and he had 60 caps and 1 goal since 2014. And he plays for Sevilla in Spain since 2019. Prior to that, he did a little stint in China, or actually was with a couple of teams in China before that. Anyway, Gudelj was not selected for the World Cup in 2018, but he was in 2022, where he started game 1 but lost his starting position. Since that time, though, Gudelj has started 9 of their 13 games, so one of the most starting players there. He was on the bench for 1 and not selected for 3 games. That was the first match, the friendly with the USA, but more worryingly, the last 2 matches. However, we still have him as a likely candidate, given that he started so many games, and we don't think the last 2 matches is necessarily putting him out of contention. Next, we have Ivan Ilic, and he's 23 years old. He has 14 caps and no goals since 2021 and plays for Torino in Italy since 2023. He was actually on the Manchester City squad in England from 2017 to 20, but he was mostly loaned out and didn't play any games for them. Ilic was selected for the World Cup in 2022 as a substitute, and over the period since, he has started 3 of their 13 games, subbing in for 4 and on the bench for 3. He was injured for the last 2 matches, but he has since recovered. So Ivan Ilic, a likely candidate. Next, we have Sasha Lukic, and I probably should have put him above Ilic because he started more games. Sasha Lukic is 27 years old and has 44 caps and 2 goals since 2018. And he plays for Fulham in England since 2023 and was with Torino in Italy for a long time before that. Not selected in World Cup 2018, actually not really a consideration. He had only one appearance on the bench prior to that tournament, but he was a starter in the 2022 World Cup, and he has since started 7 of their 13 games and was subbed in for 2 and out with injuries for 3 matches there too. So Sasha Lukic, a likely candidate. We do have Sergej Milinkovic-Savic. He's coded as a centre midfielder, but we're going to move him to upfield as a right attacker. So we'll come back to him. Our possible candidate then is Marko Grujic, and he's 28 years old, and he has 24 caps since 2016, no goals. and he plays for Porto in Portugal since 2020 and was with the Liverpool in England, at least on their roster for 4 years prior to that. He was loaned out a bit. Selected for both tournaments and a substitute in each, actually just on the bench in 2018. But he did see a little field time in 2022. And Gruzic has since started 4 of their 13 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. But out with injuries for 3 and not selected for 4, including the last 2 matches. So that's why we have Gruzic just as a possible candidate here. All right, that is all the candidates filling 2 positions in the 3-4-1-2, so 2 central midfielders here, maybe more on the defensive end. And in the cup, it was Lukic starting all 3 games, but with a different partner in each game. After the cup, it was never a stable pairing, with several players coming in and out of the position. So again, the best way to handle this is to just talk about the number of starts each player got. Lukic started 5 in central defense, and Gudelj 3 games, and both of those played other positions. We've seen Gudelj played as a central defender, and Lukic, I think, had 2 starts as a left attacking, a left attacker. The other players we met here, Grujic, Ilic, and Maximovic, each played 3 games, and then several players played just 1 game, and we won't mention them except for attacking midfielder Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, who we'll meet here soon. I wanted to point that out because he played as a defensive midfielder in the cup as well as one of the games here. So he really is a central midfielder. And we'll meet him right away here. We're going to go directly, actually, to the left attacking position. We're not going to cover left midfielders and right midfielders because the formation doesn't call for it, and we only had 1 candidate coded as a right midfielder. That was Dusan Tadic, but he's been playing as a right attacker, so we'll cover him there. So let's go upfield then and look at the left attackers. So that is in the 3-4-2-1 formation, usually a left attacking midfielder, but we've seen a couple of variations on that formation. One of them a 4-3-3, which makes it a forward position. Only 1 game though, and sometimes it's not used in the 3-4-1-2. There is no right attacker or left attacker. Anyway, let's look at the candidates, because most games do use a left attacking midfielder, and the main candidate is Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, brother of the goalkeeper who we met earlier. And Milinkovic-Savic here is a likely candidate. We also have Filip Kostic. He's coded as a left winger. And so we dealt with him there in the left winger position before. So the other candidate here is Filip Jurisic. Filip Jurisic as a possible candidate. And let's take a look at them. So Sergei Milinkovic-Savic is 29 years old, and he got 49 caps and 8 goals since 2017. One of his goals was scored recently in the March games there. And he plays for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. I thought there was just 1 player with Al Hilal. It actually could be that the season has ended, so there some of the loan spells that we see, or even some of the contracts that we see, might have changed. But no, it actually is true that Serbia has two big players playing for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, one of them. He was born in Spain, actually, and he was selected for both the World Cups in 2018 and 2022, and a starter in both of them as well. And since then, he has started 6 of their 13 games and subbed in for 4. There were 3 matches that he was not selected for. The possible candidate, Filip Juric, is 32 years old, and he's been with the team since 2012. 43 caps and 5 goals for him. He's the second player we're meeting who plays for Panathinaikos in Greece. He's been there since 2023, and he was not selected for the World Cup in 2018. Actually, not even a consideration because he hadn't appeared for 2 years up to that point. But he came back to the team and ended up being selected for the World Cup in 2022, just a substitute there. Jurisic started 4 of their 13 games since the start of 2023. He subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 3. But there were 5 matches he was not selected for, and that includes the last 2 matches. So Filip Jurisic, a bit on the ropes here. We have him just as a possible candidate. Okay, let's look at the position. I've already said that it's almost always a left attacking midfield role. Sergei Milinkovic-Savic started the first 2 games of the World Cup, and in the 3rd game they used a 4-3-1-2 position, and so the position didn't exist. However, they used it mostly over the following period, and it was Milinkovic-Savic getting the most starts in the position. However, that was only 4 of the 13 games. Milinkovic-Savic also played once as a defensive midfielder and also switched sides once to play as a right attacking midfielder. Anyway, on the left side, Jurisic also had 4 starts, but 3 of those were in the friendly games. And finally, Gacinovic had 2 starts and several players had 1. The position also sometimes not being used. Okay, next we have the right attacking players. We saw Dusan Tadic moved over here. He's coded as a right midfielder and is the captain of the team, and he's a definite candidate here. And we also have Lavar Samardžić as a likely candidate here. So let's take a look at these players. Tadic is 35 years old now. He has 106 caps and 22 goals since 2008, and he plays for Fenerbahce in Turkey since 2023. He was a starter in both the World Cup 2018 and 2022, and Tadic has started 8 of their 13 games over the recent period, as well as subbing in for 4. The only match he missed was that January friendly with the USA B team. So Tadic, a definite candidate. Lazar Samardžić is actually coded as an attacking midfielder. We've moved him here because his starts have been here. Samardžić is 22 years old and has 7 caps and no goals since 2023. But one of those younger players coming through with good clubs. He played for Udinese in Italy since 2021 and was with Leipzig in Germany before that. Samardžić has got his first cap in March of 2023 and went on to start 3 of their remaining 12 games and was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 5 others. So almost definite as far as being selected for the squad goes. But because he's a new player, I think we put him as a likely. Okay, let's summarize the position. In the World Cup, it was Tadic in the first 2 games, and the position was not used in game 3. And almost exclusively after that, it was Tadic. So unlike some positions where we're seeing a lot of changes, this position is very steady in Tadic playing the role. Samardzic, though, did start twice there, both of those starts in friendlies. Okay, we move up to central attacking midfield, and just a couple of times they've used this role in the 4-3-1-2. They have a central attacking midfielder. We do have a couple of candidates coded as attacking midfielder, Andrija Zivkovic, but we moved him to the right wing for this discussion, and Lazar Samardzic, we moved him to the right attacking role. Those are the only players coded as attacking midfielders, and so I'll just summarize the position. We did see in the World Cup that in Game 3, they went to a 4-3-1-2 that employs this position, and they did so a couple of times afterwards. Invariably, though, it was Dusan Tadic who moved into the position because his right attacking position disappeared in those formations. So Dusan Tadic, the main man here too. Let's go on to forward, the forward line. We don't have any players coded as secondary strikers, just forwards, and actually not that many of them. Let's introduce the candidates. We have Alexander Mitrovic as a definite, and Dusan Vlahovic as a possible candidate. Another possible is Luka Jovic, and then a player, two players possible but unlikely, Dejan Joveljic and Petar Ratkov. There. Okay, let's go back and look at them. We have Alexander Mitrovic, who is 29 years old and has 89 caps and 57 goals since 2013. He's playing for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia since 2023 and was with Fulham in England for 5 years before that. Now, we do see two of Serbia's big players on Al Hilal, and that used to be kind of considered a retirement move when they moved from Europe to a place like China or Saudi Arabia, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. And we do see some kind of younger and players active with their national teams moving to some of these leagues outside of Europe. So Alexander Mitrovic is one of them. He was a starter in both the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. Prolific scorer, as you see, one of the highest percentages in the world in scoring. And Mitrovic has proven it again. He scored 5 of their goals in Euro Cup qualifying here, including a hat-trick in 22 minutes. So still has his scoring boots, Mitrovic. He started 8 of their 13 games. Since the beginning of this period, he was subbed in for 2 and not selected for 3. So Alexander Mitrovic, a definite candidate. The first of our possible candidates is Dusan Vlahovic. He's 24 years old with 25 caps and 13 goals. Excuse me, I had to cough there. 25 caps and 13 goals since 2020. So not a bad scoring ratio himself, above 50% there. Vlahovic plays for Juventus in Italy since 2022 and was selected for the World Cup. In 2018, he wasn't part of the team, but in 2022 was selected and he was a substitute. Despite his good scoring ratio and his good club affiliation, he's really not a starter. A bit difficult to get ahead of Mitrovic there. He started only 3 of their 13 games in 2023. He was also subbed in for 3, but he was out with 3 separate injuries for 6 games, including the last 2 matches. Interestingly, though, his club record shows no sign of this problem, and he's not on the injured list, so not sure what's going on there. But Dusan Vlahovic, all in all, a possible candidate for us here, and probably higher due to the lack of candidates and the factors I mentioned. But we landed on possible here, but probably more likely than that. Luka Jovic is our other possible candidate, and he's 26 years old, and a bit like Vlahovic, with a good record and good club affiliation. He has been with the team since 2018 and has 10 goals in his 33 caps, and is with AC Milan in Italy since 2023. He actually was around for the World Cup in 2018 and was selected and a substitute there, and also selected in 2020 and a substitute in both games. He appeared in game 3. Jovic has started only one of their 13 games since the start of 2023. He was subbed in for 2, on the bench for 2, ill for a couple, and not selected for 8 others. But he did return in March of 2024, and he got most of his minutes over the last 2 matches, so perhaps working his way in a bit more to the team. But we have Luka Jovic as a possible candidate here. Possible but unlikely is Dejan Jovelic, and he is with LA Galaxy in the United States, but he was not selected for the last 8 matches there, but he did start 2 of them, so wouldn't be a surprise to see him recalled, especially given the lack of candidates here. Finally, we have Petar Radkov, also possible but unlikely, and he got his first cap in October 2023, and of the remaining 6 games, he was subbed in for 1, on the bench for 1, and with the under-23 team for 2, and not selected for the last 2. So kind of poked his head into the team, and looks like he didn't make a strong enough impression there. Okay, let's review the position then. So in their formation, it's usually just 1 forward, but sometimes 2. In the World Cup, it was Mitrovic as the sole forward for the first 2 games, but Vlahovic partnered him in the formation change of game 3. Mitrovic played most games as a single forward after, but when it was 2, Vlahovic stepped in, and he was also the sole forward one time, was Vlahovic. Jovic started 2 of the early games, but as we saw, he now seems to be off the squad, whereas Jovic started the second last game, which was a friendly, so probably has a greater chance with that recent participation. All right, that brings us to the end of our look at the players, and now we move on to section 3. So any closing thoughts? So really not a huge squad to choose from for Serbia. Like some of the smaller countries, they kind of rely on a small number of players, and the bench is not that deep. Although for Serbia, the bench actually seems fairly good quality, with some players playing for big clubs. Whether they're starting or not is another question, but at least on the rosters of big clubs, but only a small number of caps for the national team. So that bodes well for the future. We have a couple of positions that seem very much undecided, or whether they're doing kind of a rotation of players on purpose. It's not the same candidates in the same position, and we'll see that when we review the starters. But we do have a couple of positions where they're clear starters. So that leads us into our kind of run through the list to identify definite starters. And we begin with manager Dragan Stojkovic. So he will be the manager. We're sure he won't be changed before the Cup. And goalkeeper Vanja Milinkovic-Savic, although he did start only 8 of the 13 games, Serbia was a little difficult to analyze because they had some friendlies in there where they used unlikely players, or they gave bench players some time. Looking through all that, though, it does seem Vanja Milenkovic-Savic is the starting keeper quite solidly. Not so clear in the defense, though. Serbia uses a three-man defensive line, and we don't really see enough players starting enough to say that they're going to be a starter. So we can say it'll probably be Pavlovic, the most likely candidate, and I think I will nominate him as a starter. But the other players, Milenkovic, Erakovic, and Veljkovic, really not getting enough starts to persuade us that they would be the starters, although those are some of the names that we do expect to see in the position. Over to the left wing, it seems a rotation. So we're not doing left backs here because it's always a winger for Serbia in their consistent 3-4-2-1 formation. And so we changed the organization a little bit. So over on the left wing, we see basically a rotation between Filip Kostic and Filip Mladenovic. So the only thing we can say for certainty is it will be someone named Filip. But even in the World Cup, those two kind of seem to alternate in the position. Not so on the right side, where we do have a definite, we can say with confidence that Andrea Zivkovic will be the starter. Now to the central midfield, that's probably the biggest mess of all, with all sorts of players coming in and out. Even beyond the five players who are kind of the main ones in this position, we have some out of position players and some players on trial in the position and stuff. So we can't say anything with confidence here, other than the fact that we think Nemanja Gudelj will be a starter. However, we're not sure what position he'll be in, because in the first half of the period he was a central defender, and in the second half he was a defensive midfielder. So we think he will be a starter. The other ones, Ilic, Lukic, and Gruzic, we can't say with confidence that they'll be a starter because they haven't played enough games. But of those players, probably Lukic the most likely. Okay, up to the left attacking position. That for Serbia is a left attacking midfielder. And we see Sergej Milenkovic-Savic, brother of the goalkeeper, as the most likely candidate, but he's played less than half the games. So we're not willing to nominate him as a starter. But he probably will, I suspect. Over to the right side, though, it's as clear as day that Dusan Tadic is the starter, the right attacking midfielder. And if they switch to a formation where there's a central attacking midfielder, that'll be him too. Up to the forward line, and we have Alexander Mitrovic. And even though he started just 8 of the games, we're confident he'll be the starter. But, Vlahovic and Jovic both have good records and good club affiliations. So they're ready to step in, either to replace him or to join him as a forward if they go with that formation, or even to alternate. Okay, that is our race through the starters, and let's go to a review of injuries now. And we really don't have many, fortunately for Serbia. We only have one, Milan Gajic, and he's not really even a starter for them. He's out with a hamstring injury since mid-May, but he is expected back on June 17th. Whether that's true or not, that is right around the time of the Cup, and sometimes they do get this wrong. And there's also a consideration of whether he can return to fitness quickly enough. Anyway, Milan Gajic will be a close call and someone we can update perhaps in the second part of the of the mediacast. Okay, let's go to our conclusion. Just we preview part 2. So when the squad lists are published and we know what the final squad is going to be, we can point out any notable non-selections and any surprise inclusions, including new players. So we're looking forward to doing that not too long from now, and we hope you join us for that. We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Make Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.